You know what's absolutely insane? The biggest political backfire we've seen in years just happened, and the mainstream media is barely scratching the surface. What was supposed to be a calculated power move has turned into a complete train wreck, and the implications for the midterm elections are going to blow your mind. Stick with me here, because what I'm about to break down has more plot twists than a Netflix political drama. So let me take you back to where this all started. Last summer, Republican leadership came up with what they thought was a genius plan. They wanted to do something called mid-decade redistricting. Now, normally, congressional districts get redrawn every 10 years after the census. That's the standard process. But these guys said, why wait? Let's redraw the maps right now while we have the power to do it. And the reason behind this? Pure panic. They were looking at the midterm polls, seeing the writing on the wall, and they got scared, really scared, because if they lost control of the House, there would be serious consequences for their entire agenda. So they figured the best insurance policy was to gerrymander themselves some guaranteed safe seats before it was too late. The whole scheme started in Texas. Republican leaders went straight to the governor with a very direct request. They said, look, we need 5 additional congressional seats. Don't make this a public vote. Don't let the people decide. Just hand us 5 seats. That's it. Bold, right? And you know what? On paper, this actually seemed like it would work. Texas is solidly red, Republicans control every lever of power there, and they assumed other Republican-run states would follow Texas's lead. They were projecting at least 5 guaranteed seat gains nationwide. Some analysts even thought they could push it to 7 or 8 seats. The Republicans were feeling pretty good about themselves. But here's what they completely failed to anticipate. The Democrats weren't just going to sit back and let this happen. The California governor immediately fired back with their own counter-proposal. And this wasn't just a defensive move. This was a strategic strike that completely changed the battlefield. Then something really remarkable started happening. Democratic leaders in state after state began coordinating. And I mean really coordinating. They weren't scrambling to react. They were launching a full-scale offensive. Let me break down what happened state by state, because this is where it gets absolutely wild. In Virginia, Democrats started pushing their own redistricting plan that could create a potential 10-to-1 advantage in certain regions. Think about that. 10-to-1. That's not just winning. That's dominating. Over in Maryland, Democratic strategists immediately started organizing their own redistricting initiatives. They saw what was happening and said, okay, if we're playing this game, we're going all in. Then New York delivered a massive blow. A court actually ruled that one of the existing Republican-drawn districts was unconstitutional. That's huge. That's not just a political win. That's a legal victory that opens the door to completely redraw those district lines. And get this, even in Utah, which is one of the most conservative states in the country, Democrats managed to secure a significant redistricting victory. Utah, that tells you how badly this Republican strategy was falling apart. But wait, because it gets even crazier. There were also plans to do redistricting in Indiana. Should have been easy, right? Republican state, Republican control. Except then, something completely unprecedented happened. The former president started personally attacking the Republican state senators in Indiana. And I'm not talking about policy disagreements. I'm talking about nasty personal attacks. He even made offensive comments about disabled people, attacking them directly. These Republican senators who were supposed to be on his side got so fed up that they basically said, you know what, if this is how you're going to treat us, we don't want any part of your redistricting plan, and they voted it down. The Republican senators voted down the Republican redistricting plan because their own party leader attacked them so viciously. You cannot make this up. So let's do the math here, because this is where it gets really interesting. Republicans started this whole thing expecting to gain at least 5 seats nationwide. Best case scenario in their minds was maybe 7 or 8. But after all the Democratic countermoves and the Indiana disaster, where are we now? Republicans are now looking at a potential deficit of 5 seats. Let that sink in. They went from +5 to -5. That's a 10-seat swing in the wrong direction. Political experts are now calling this dumb mandering, a redistricting effort so catastrophically mismanaged that it actually hurt the party that started it more than it helped them. And how is the Republican leadership responding to this absolute disaster? Well, they're basically running away, literally. We're seeing party leaders on Capitol Hill sprinting away from reporters, refusing to answer questions, ducking into elevators, hiding in offices. One reporter asked a simple question about whether they were concerned about the president's health and mental state, and the response was to deflect and run. That's not leadership, that's panic. But here's what makes this even more fascinating. While all of this political chaos is unfolding, there's another story running parallel that nobody's really connecting the dots on. See, the former president tried to distract everyone from some pretty damaging file releases by suddenly making a huge deal about wanting to acquire Greenland. Yeah, Greenland. That wasn't a typo. And you know what's wild? The polling on this is absolutely brutal. Americans are overwhelmingly against this whole Greenland thing. We're talking about a net negative approval of 40 points. 40 points underwater. That's catastrophically unpopular. And get this, it's actually polling worse than the very scandal he was trying to distract people from. So the distraction is more unpopular than the thing he was trying to distract from. It's political malpractice. But here's where it gets really interesting from a human interest perspective. While all this is happening at the national level, there are real races happening in real districts where real people are fighting for these seats. And some of these races are absolutely critical to determining who controls the House after the midterms. Take New Jersey's 7th Congressional District, for example. This is one of those districts that's been identified as a prime flip opportunity. The current congressman there, he's been in politics his entire adult life, career politician through and through. And his voting record? He votes with the party line 100% of the time. Every single vote. No independence, no representation of his actual constituents' interests, just pure party loyalty. And the frustrating thing is, this guy just refuses to engage with the people he's supposed to represent. People try to ask him questions at town halls, and he either doesn't show up or he dodges. When his own constituents needed him to fight for critical infrastructure funding for a tunnel project that thousands of people depend on for their daily commute, he stayed silent. When people in his district were getting crushed by tax policy changes, he voted to make it worse for them. When healthcare costs were skyrocketing and people were about to lose their insurance, he cast the deciding vote that made tens of thousands of people lose coverage. This is the kind of representation, or lack thereof, that voters in these swing districts are dealing with. And it's creating opportunities for challengers who actually want to serve the people. On the flip side, you've got challengers coming in with completely different backgrounds. Some are veterans who served in the military for over 15 years, people who actually put their lives on the line for this country, people who understand what service means. One candidate is a former Navy helicopter pilot who flew missions all over the world, then transitioned into healthcare, and is also raising kids in the district. That's someone who understands what families are going through because they're living it. And here's what's really powerful about some of these challengers. They have firsthand experience with the very issues that are in the news. Remember that Greenland situation I mentioned? Well, there are candidates who actually worked with allied navies, including the Danish Navy. They know these allies personally. They know the sacrifices these countries made when America invoked Article 5 and asked for help. Per capita, Denmark lost more soldiers in Afghanistan and Iraq than almost any other nation. They fought side by side with American troops. And now the current administration is threatening to invade their territory? For candidates who worked alongside these allies, who saw them bleed for American causes, this is deeply personal. These candidates are saying, look, we're facing a cost of living crisis. Families can't afford childcare. Healthcare costs are out of control. Energy bills are crushing people. Grocery prices have skyrocketed. These are the issues people actually care about. But instead of addressing any of that, we're watching our leaders pick unnecessary fights with our closest allies and push foreign policy adventures that nobody wants. And that message is resonating. Because here's the thing, voters are tired. They're tired of the chaos. They're tired of the manufactured controversies. They're tired of politicians who won't even show up to answer their questions. They want somebody who will actually fight for affordable healthcare, for better infrastructure, for policies that help working families instead of hurt them. Now, I want to talk about something that's been flying under the radar but is absolutely critical to understanding what's really going on. While all this political drama is playing out in public, there's a whole other game being played behind the scenes. Some of these same politicians who are pushing these controversial policies, who are creating all this chaos, they're also actively trading stocks. And I'm not talking about passive investments. I'm talking about significant positions in specific companies, timed perfectly with their committee assignments and policy decisions. You've got members of Congress sitting on committees that regulate entire industries, and then they're taking massive stock positions in companies within those exact industries. Semiconductor companies, tech firms, defense contractors. It's happening over and over again. And the timing? Let's just say it's remarkably convenient. The market gets manipulated by policy announcements and tweets, and somehow these politicians always seem to be positioned perfectly to benefit. So while ordinary Americans are watching their retirement accounts yo-yo up and down based on whatever chaotic announcement comes out on any given day, some of the people creating that chaos are apparently making out pretty well for themselves. That's the reality of what we're dealing with. But here's the thing, and this is really important. All of this chaos, all of this dysfunction, it's not inevitable. It's not just how things are. It's the result of specific choices made by specific people, and those people can be replaced. That's what the midterm elections are actually about. The redistricting disaster I talked about at the beginning, that's creating opportunities. Real opportunities in real districts for new voices to get into office. The dumb mandering strategy that backfired so spectacularly has actually opened up seats that were supposed to be safe. Districts that should have been locks for incumbents are now competitive. And that means voters actually have a choice. And voters are responding to candidates who are talking about real issues: affordability, healthcare, infrastructure, education, national security approached with actual wisdom instead of reckless brinkmanship. These aren't radical ideas. These are common sense priorities that the vast majority of Americans agree on, regardless of party. What we're seeing now is a realignment. The old playbook isn't working anymore. The distraction tactics aren't working. The bullying isn't working. The running away from reporters isn't working. What's working is authenticity. What's working is candidates who've actually lived the lives of the people they want to represent. What's working is people who are willing to show up, answer tough questions, and fight for their constituents even when it's hard. There are military veterans stepping up who understand what's actually at stake when you talk about foreign policy. There are healthcare professionals who've seen firsthand what happens when people lose their insurance. There are parents who are struggling with the same childcare costs and grocery bills as everyone else in their community. These are the people who are saying, enough, we can do better than this. And the polling is reflecting this shift. These supposedly safe seats are becoming toss-ups. Districts that haven't been competitive in years are suddenly in play. The momentum has completely flipped from where it was when this whole redistricting scheme started. So where does all of this leave us? Well, the midterm elections are shaping up to be absolutely critical, not because of the typical partisan talking points, but because they represent a real choice about what kind of representation people want. Do you want career politicians who vote party line 100% of the time and won't even show up to town halls? Or do you want people who've actually served, who've actually worked in the communities they want to represent, who will actually fight for the issues that matter to working families? The redistricting fiasco has inadvertently created the most competitive House map we've seen in years. Seats that were supposed to be locked down are now legitimately up for grabs, and candidates who are focused on real issues, not manufactured controversies, not political theater, but actual policy solutions, are gaining serious traction. This is one of those moments where individual races really matter, where a handful of seats could determine control of the entire House, where voters in swing districts have an outsized impact on the direction of the country. And the candidates who are stepping up in these races, their stories matter, their backgrounds matter, what they're promising to fight for matters. Because at the end of the day, politics isn't supposed to be about chaos and distraction and manufactured crises. It's supposed to be about solving real problems for real people. It's supposed to be about representatives who actually represent their constituents instead of just rubber stamping whatever the party leadership tells them to do. The dumb mandering disaster has created an opening. The question now is whether voters will take advantage of it, whether they'll look past the noise and the chaos and focus on which candidates are actually offering real solutions, whether they'll support people who want to serve instead of people who just want to advance their own careers and stock portfolios. So that's where we are. A completely botched redistricting strategy that was supposed to lock in Republican control has instead created one of the most competitive midterm maps in recent history. Democrats have not only fought back, they've potentially taken the lead. And in key swing districts all across the country, new candidates with compelling backgrounds and real solutions are stepping up to challenge career politicians who've stopped even pretending to represent their constituents. The next few months are going to be absolutely critical. Pay attention to these races. Look at who the candidates actually are, what they've actually done, and what they're actually promising to fight for. Because the outcome of these midterms isn't predetermined. It's going to come down to voter engagement, voter turnout, and whether people in these swing districts decide they've had enough of the chaos and dysfunction. This is your moment to pay attention. This is your moment to get informed. And this is your moment to make your voice heard. Because if this whole redistricting disaster has taught us anything, it's that nothing in politics is inevitable. Strategic mistakes can be punished. Overreach can backfire. And when people organize and fight back, they can win even when all the conventional wisdom says they shouldn't. So, stay tuned, stay engaged, and watch what happens next. Because this story is far from over, and how it ends is going to be determined by what happens in these next few months leading up to the midterms. The pieces are in place, the map is competitive, the candidates are there. Now it's up to the voters to decide what comes next.